The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of ParaX, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices.
They're not yours. You had no right to them when you were alive, and you have no right to them when you're dead. Did he say Hershey? That's what it sounded like. Good, so you know who I am. And then you know I'm not playing. You're going to let those women go. In Jesus' name, you're going to let those women go.
Is there a demon here watching us right now? Watching us right now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr. With me, as always, my co-host, old boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How's everybody tonight?
On tonight's episode, we want to kind of dig in a little bit to this new discovery in Egypt underneath the pyramids. It's pretty spectacular stuff, and it's interesting because we've done a couple shows now on the pyramids, and what they found was essentially what we had talked about before, about Tesla's theory that what the pyramids actually were some sort of energy device, some sort of like giant battery or almost like an energy collector type thing. And so what they found using the ground penetrating radar, the SAR, what they found was like pillar structures that go down like 600 meters. And then down at the bottom of that, there's like pretty much a whole city down there is what they're saying. And the total depth is like 1.15 miles, I believe. So just over a mile. Because the pillars themselves go down, I think they said 2,500 feet. And then there's other structures 4,000 feet deeper than that. So we're talking a little over a mile deep, which is pretty spectacular. Now, whether or not those pillars were some sort of energy devices, like a lightning rod almost, or like some sort of capacitor or something like that, who knows? You'd have to dig them up to find out. To me, that's like the least interesting part of all this. The most interesting part to me is the fact that it goes a mile deep. And it's almost like a city down there. There's a bunch of different structures, they say. To me, that's very, very interesting because that means one of two things. And either one of these things I'm about to talk about completely change everything that we thought we knew. Okay? Number one is if they dug down over a mile into the earth in order to construct all this stuff, that wasn't done by the Egyptians. Okay, there's no way that a bunch of slaves built that. It's not possible. You're not digging that far down in the ground without one, heavy machinery that can move a lot of earth. Two, you have to have like diamond tip drills to get through some of the tougher layers of bedrock and stuff like that you're going to find. That's just not something that's going to be done by just, Hebrew slaves. That's what the story was. They built the pyramids. That's just not possible, So there's that option that they dug down that far, which means that there's no way they did it. That had to be done by somebody else in an earlier time. And if that's the case, what that means is that there were advanced civilizations. Not just like a little bit advanced or a little bit more advanced than the Egyptians. We're talking advanced civilizations that have technology equal to or even greater than what we have today in order to go that deep in the earth and build that kind of structure. Okay, we talked on other shows about other structures that are built deep into the ground that come from ancient times. One dates back to right after the flood, right after the end of the Ice Age, like around 11,000 years ago. And it's a whole complex of cave systems that were dug out of the ground. Essentially, it's like a giant city underground. It's got a bunch of little chambers that are connected by passages and all kinds of stuff that could fit like 100,000 people or more down there. And that's pretty spectacular. So that tells you that in order to dig that kind of structure out of rock, in order to carve that out, I don't think that's done by a hammer and chisel. I don't think that that's done by people with shovels and pickaxes. I don't buy that. That is a hell of a lot of work to be done by that little bit of technology. You know, you got to have bigger equipment to move that kind of earth. You have to have at least diamond tip drills, some of the precision on the stones that we talked about before, the pyramid. You're talking laser technology in order to make those cuts. So it could be that, or it could be some technology that we never even considered before. Because there's no guarantee that if it was an ancient civilization, that it went the same way that we did. Okay, it may not have developed its technology on the same path we did. It could have went completely different. We've used the analogy before of like crystals, that example. Right? They could have used crystal technology instead of chip technology, which is what we use. Could be a completely different thing. We just have no idea. So that's one option. And the other option kind of goes almost along that same path. Because let's say they didn't dig all the way down to build that city and those chambers and everything. If that's the case, if they didn't dig to build it, they built it at ground level and up into the sky. Okay? Because you got to think it goes ground level and then the pyramid, which is kind of the topper of the posts that are there. So they would be like the top of the towers. The pyramids are over a mile above the city. So we're talking like skyscraper height or higher, right? So if they built it at ground level, they still needed advanced technology to do that. But the fact that it is now a mile under the ground, that is telling. What that means is a hell of a lot of time has passed for it to be buried that deep. Because as time goes on, things die and they decompose and they form soil, and it just keeps piling layer after layer after layer throughout time. So in order for a whole mile of it to build up, I mean, you're talking well before any kind of recorded history. You know, you're talking not 10,000 years ago, not 20,000 years ago. You might be talking 100,000 years ago or more to build up over a mile of depth like that. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So what that tells us is that not only do we have advanced civilizations before that we did not know about, right? That we're capable of doing these things. Because scientists and archaeologists today think that at that time period, those people were like hunter-gatherers. Well, we're talking the end of the Ice Age. We're talking like 11,000 years ago. Okay, they think that those people were hunter-gatherers and nomadic, and that they weren't capable of building large cities and everything. Now, we know that's not true, because if you look down in South America where the rainforest is, they had massive cities there. Inside the rainforest and around that area are all kinds of pyramids that were built. They say by the Aztecs, but I'd say even before the Aztecs came along, there was pyramids there. There was civilizations there. If you look at the rainforest, that's not a naturally occurring forest. That used to be orchards. By the fruit trees and everything that are in there and the way they're laid out, that used to be orchard land. That used to be places where people grew things to eat, farming and orchards. And when that civilization died off, it got overgrown. But that is still there. The food is still there, growing wild, in the same way that it was being grown then. So there's evidence that the rainforest is not just a forest, it was agriculture made by man to feed an advanced civilization of that time period, which was before what we think of as the beginning of civilization, long before that. But if this is the case, that they built this at ground level and it's just been covered up over the years, then that means that stretches back long, long before we even thought people were capable of doing anything. Long before. So that totally rewrites the history of mankind as we know it. I mean, completely rewrites it. Now, there's a lot of question about time. Because if you talk about the normal passage of time, and you talk about how much soil gets built a year, okay, you're talking an inch or two in the best circumstances a year. They naturally gets built up. So extrapolate that to a mile. I mean, you're talking a long period of time to do that, correct? But here's the problem. We know that at the end of the Ice Age, around 11,000 years ago, that there were impacts by asteroids. We know that there were volcanic eruptions at that time. We know that there was a worldwide flood that happened around that time. Now, what does a flood do? If you've ever been in an area that's had a massive flood, what it does is it washes everything down and it piles up sediment to great heights. So it could be that the number is off as far as years of civilization. It could be that a lot of that happened not over a period of years or a period of decades or centuries, right? It could be that it all happened in the blink of an eye when the flood came through and washed all that material up there. I mean, it could be. It could be that you've got these canyons and all this stuff that on the planet where the water rushed through. And it could be that all of that material that got moved to create those big canyons and wide, like crater marks and all this kind of stuff, where the asteroid hit and moved all that debris and then the water come through and shoved all the loose stuff away. It could be that a lot of that sediment piled up at certain points. And I'm not saying that's the case at this exact site. I'm just saying from what we know of geology and how we judge how much time has passed by how many layers there are and what the depth is, those numbers could be off. Because when you're talking a worldwide flood, you're talking finding fossils of aquatic creatures that lived in the ocean up at the tops of mountains. Now, the only way they got there is that was underwater at some point, where there were sea creatures swimming around it. We know we had a worldwide flood. We know that it lasted for quite a while before the waters receded. So we know that there was sea life at that height at one point. And we don't know exactly how long it took that water to go away. Okay? So you're talking a lot of potential layers getting built up fairly quickly that would throw off any kind of guesstimates we could really make. Now, you could say, well, do you have any proof that happened at that site? No, I don't. But who knows? If the whole world is flooded, it's possible that any place could have built up a ton of sediment. I'm sure most places did build up a lot of sediment, and other places were a lot lower because sediment got washed away. Now, I'd have to really study the area and look at like a topographic study of the area to really determine where I thought material moved from and where it went to. And I haven't done any of that, so I can't make an educated guess on whether that's the case, but I'm saying there is potential for that being the case. So if it was buried by sediment from the flood, then that means that the timeline is off. Maybe it didn't take place super, super, super long ago. Now, it still would have taken place, I would think, before the time of the Egyptians. I think they got there, the pyramids were already there. And I think they lived there for generation after generation after generation. And eventually people were like, who built this shit? Well, it had to be us because we're the people that are living here. Nobody else is living here. So we had to be us, right? I think that's kind of what went down. I think the idea that the original people had when they got there of what the hell is this? Who built this stuff? Eventually over time kind of got lost. And everybody just assumed that they had built it because it had always been there for their whole lives. And their father's lives and their grandfather's lives and his father's life, they had always been there. So they figured, well, yeah, our ancestors built this, And I think that's probably the way it went down. But as far as who actually built it, who knows? Now, as always, when you talk about the Egyptians and you talk about the pyramids, you always get the exact same thing that comes out always. And that is, well, the aliens built them. It was aliens that did it. And you're always going to have that in this conversation. No matter what you do, there's people that are just set on the fact that it was aliens that built the pyramids. Does this disprove that? No. It doesn't prove it because there's logical explanations of why they could be there, the pillars could be there, and why there's a city underneath there. There's logical reasoning for that. But it doesn't disprove the alien theory either. And then old boy sent me a video today, actually, or I don't know if he sent it today or yesterday, but I saw it today, of some kind of weird craft floating above the pyramid. Now, I don't know when that's from. I don't know what that is. I don't know if it's real or if it's fake. All I know is a video that I saw, okay, that he sent me. I haven't been able to check in and see whether it's bullshit or not. But that's an interesting little twist to this as well. Now, the people that would say that that's real and the aliens are coming back because we discovered it, you know what I mean? That's something I've heard, is that because we have found what's underneath the pyramids, then they realize that and they come back to check on us, right? I don't know if I buy that or not, because how the hell would they know, really, unless they're monitoring our news and everything? Who knows? But I don't know. To me, it's interesting because it no matter what, it changes everything. It is no longer that the Egyptians built the pyramids using slaves, because the pyramids aren't structures all by themselves. They are literally the cap that sits on top of very, very deep pillars that go 600 meters under the ground, 2,000 feet. And then underneath that, another 4,000 feet underneath that are other structures. So you've got like a city down here, and you've got these giant cylindrical towers that go up into the sky. And sitting on top of those towers is the pyramid cap. Now, what those towers are for, or if they're just supports, who knows? We don't know because we haven't dug them up to see and to try to figure it out. But it's very, very interesting. It could be that the pyramids were some sort of lightning rod in a way that they would because think about it, if it's built at ground level and you got something going a mile up into the atmosphere, right? That's high. And if they were coated with something, some sort of metal, gold or some sort of metal that would attract electricity, right? Then it could be that that's exactly what they were used for. They were lightning rods. And lightning would strike them and they would channel that electricity through the foundation. Maybe the foundation was wrapped in spiral fashion all the way down it in some sort of copper or something like that. We know that they had copper, right? That would conduct the electricity. That would enable it to flow from the cap where the lightning struck all the way down the pillars and be collected down at the bottom, be used in some way to maybe power their whole civilization. That could very well be what that is. Maybe it didn't even rely on lightning strikes at all. Maybe they were able to use like ionic technology in order to literally pull electricity straight from the air, to capture the free-flowing ions and stuff that are in the air and create electricity that way. Channel it through, take it down the foundation with the copper coil, down to batteries down below that could hold it all. And then that's how they powered everything. It could be. I'm not saying that's the answer. I don't know. Because like I said, we haven't dug it up. We don't know what it's made of. But if you think about why you would have a pyramid on top of a long-ass cylinder and a city at the bottom, what other purpose could that really serve? I mean, why would you need to have a pyramid on top of a cylinder a mile above your city? It's not like you're going up there. You're not climbing a mile up to go into the pyramid very often. That's not something that most people are going to do. Now, maybe they had like elevators and shit like we do today. Who knows? That could take them from the bottom all the way up to the top in a timely manner. That's a possibility. It's a lot of very interesting stuff because really anything's on the table here, because you got to get rid of that old mindset that we used to have, to where, oh, well, they couldn't have elevators. They didn't have any kind of technology like that. These are just primitive people. Well, primitive people don't either dig a mile down to build a city, or they don't build a tower with a pyramid on top a mile above their city. Primitive people can't do that. That's advanced civilization is what that is. That's pretty amazing. What if they were like launch points? What if the towers that they sit on, what if they were like platforms that ships would land on? They were like little spaceports, kind of, but not in space. But pretty damn high up, so it's pretty easy to get into space from there. You don't need a whole lot of thrust because you're really high. That's pretty interesting idea. What if that's what the pyramids are? What if the pyramids themselves were either ships or some sort of refueling place for ships? You don't know. We have electric technology now. If they're capable of gathering electricity like Tesla thought, then maybe that's what they were. They were charging stations. Could be. I mean, none of this stuff is proven. None of this stuff, we don't know if it's true or not. It's all theory at this point. But damn, is it interesting. And one thing's for sure, they weren't burial tombs for the pharaohs. I mean, they might have been used for that by the Egyptians who found these pyramids and didn't know what the hell they were. So they said, well, let's just stick our kings in there because kings should be in a cool place like this. But I don't think that's what they were originally were. Because why would you do that? Why would you put your pharaoh over a mile above the city in some pyramid that nobody will ever be able to visit? And how are you going to carry all that shit up there? You know what I mean? You got to remember the pharaohs were buried with gold and treasure and slaves and all this kind of shit. How are you going to carry all of that shit over a mile in the air? Now, at the time of ancient Egypt, you didn't have to go a mile in the air because it was right there at ground level, the pyramid was. But that's not the original use of the pyramid as the Egyptians. It goes long before that when they were built. So, as far as what the original use of the pyramids, who knows? But you just got to try to use logic and say, why would they have a pyramid on top of a damn giant pole, essentially? What would be the purpose of that? And my thought is probably like either a lightning rod or some sort of way to gather energy from the upper atmosphere. I mean, Tesla talked about that all the time, about being able to harness energy from the atmosphere and literally power everything for free without having to run wires and do all this crazy shit that we ended up doing, because there's energy all around us. It's just a matter of learning how to harness it. Maybe he was basing that on technology that had already existed in the past. And either he figured it out again or he discovered some of that technology and figured out what it was used for. I don't think it's a coincidence that Tesla, one of the greatest minds our world has ever known, has been pretty much forgotten from history. We don't teach a whole lot about Tesla in school. I mean, it might mention him, but as much as that guy knew and the discoveries that he made, we should be spending a lot of time talking about him, but we just don't. And he died like broke. I think that people didn't want the general public to know that you could get free energy out of the air and that you didn't have to pay for energy. People didn't want that. I mean, at that time, electricity was just starting to get a foothold. I mean, you had the whole AC versus DC thing going on, and you had direct current versus alternating current. AC ended up winning that battle, but it was dirty the way they did it. I mean, basically, they said that they hooked up, they convinced the jails to hook up the new electric chair that they were coming up with to Tesla's DC, direct current. And when they did that and they fried a person using it, then everybody freaked out. And they said, look, see what this is capable of doing? It's dangerous. It can kill people. That's why you should go with our alternating current instead of the direct current. So I don't know. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But look that up sometime and check out that story. That's a crazy ass story, man. Edison versus Tesla and AC versus DC, trying to figure out what to actually use. And the sad thing is, Tesla's idea was better. It would have been better for all of us, but they screwed him over, like they often do. And the funny thing about geniuses is they're very smart and they're very good at what they're doing. But most times, people that are that smart, they're not very savvy when it comes to other things. So they're so smart, they're almost stupid in a lot of ways, if that makes sense. Like Einstein couldn't even brush his own hair and take care of himself properly. He had to have somebody that looked after his grooming and his hygiene because he just didn't give a shit about it. There's always those things with super smart people. They're really good at one thing that they're doing, but when it comes to other things in life, they're just not too bright, when it comes to that kind of stuff. I have things like that in my life too that I just do not do very well. And my wife picks up a lot of slack for me in a lot of areas because of that. I'm very good at what I do. I'm very good at the fields that I excel in, that I study. But other things in life just baffle me, and I just can't be bothered with them, And that's just kind of the way it goes. So the reason I say that is because I think Tesla, as smart as he was probably pretty easy to take advantage of, because he was so smart that he was almost childlike in a lot of ways. He trusted people he shouldn't have trusted, and he didn't look out for the screw job the way he should have. Because he didn't have any real experience in business or any inclination to get involved in that kind of stuff. He wanted to make the world better. He wanted to do some amazing things. And whenever there's money involved or the potential for profit, unscrupulous people are going to screw over geniuses every time they can. They're going to use you, they're going to take your inventions, and they're going to screw you over. And you're going to end up with nothing, even though you came up with the idea that changed the world. But you don't make anything off of it. Other people do. And that's kind of the way it works. Unfortunately, that's life. It's happened over and over and over again in this crazy world we live in. So basically what I think is it's one of those two things. Either they dug down that far to make a city, which means there's no way in hell that the ancient Egyptians did that it was an advanced civilization before them, or they built it at ground level and they built towers that went over a mile into the sky, which also means there's no way in hell the ancient Egyptians did that. and it was an advanced civilization that had to have advanced technology to be able to do that. Either way, it goes back way further than recorded history, which completely rewrites and changes history as we know it. Now, this has to be confirmed. It has to be studied much more to determine exactly what we're looking at, exactly what we're dealing with. It has to be repeated over and over and over again. The experiment where you're doing the radar sampling to make sure that that is exactly what it is. But from what it looks like now, everything that we thought we knew about the human history has changed, which is pretty damn exciting. So with that being said, I'm going to throw over to Old Boy and see what he thinks about all this. And if he wants to talk a little bit more about the video he sent me with the UFO alien craft or whatever it was floating above the pyramid, that would be fine too. So go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, and so what's weird about this show is I didn't know we were going to do that, and I sent it to him, not knowing that till after. So it had pretty much the same, well, not exact same story, but the same place. So, and I saw it does look like something I've never seen in my life. I have to agree with him. There's no tool. I've seen experts. I've done a lot of things about the pyramids and stuff like that. It's almost impossible for them to cut, even with the technology we have, how perfectly it was cut. Yes, I believe they had some kind of technology or alien technology. I believe maybe what those are, what you're seeing with the pyramids, and they're not just there in Egypt. They had them in the moon. They had them in Mars. They're beacons. And what happened was, in my opinion, is I think that they took off and left because something happened here, like the world ended or something. You know what I mean? Something like that, or something came, and they left the humans thinking they were gonna go get destroyed, and we didn't. Maybe that's what the truth is. Maybe all these things were existed at one time and they died because something happened, like Atlantis, the city of Atlantis. Remember, it flooded, or some people say a volcano, something, it vanished, but it did exist. There's text about it. When there's text, there's usually majority of that time is true. But the problem is I have with text is people write it in their own way. That's probably why you have a problem with men, or anybody, because they're going to write it the way they feel and what they think and way they believe. That's why I have a hard time sometimes believing in a lot of books. But sorry, my throat's dry. The desert, being outside all day, and my throat starts getting really dry. But in where I'm at in the desert, I stand outside a lot, so it gets my voice. But no, I think the pyramids were some kind of base or something, like maybe a top of a base or a beacon, and then that's why it would go down to the ground, because I saw something about what you're talking about. That's weird too. I just read something about that, how they found these tunnels, and it looks like there's like a pole now on the statue, not the pyramids. I mean, not the statue. So it looks like maybe it's a beacon. Maybe it's something they would land stuff here or something. I don't know. Maybe it was something. It was a giant base under the ground. I don't know. It could have been anything, dude. Especially in Egypt, there was a lot of different things that people saw. They even wrote it on the pyramids. So flying saucers coming out. They did it everywhere. They even have it in stone history. My personal opinion is, like I've told people, I think they helped make us smarter. I think they showed us how to do certain things, because if you look through that time, there was not really too much getting invented. All of a sudden, and this is true, since like the end of the 1900s, everything's been getting made. It's like from the 1800s to now, it blew up. Why so long of a time it took for like over 1,000 years, and then all of a sudden people blew up? It's not that. I think they got taught the technology and we made stuff. We didn't just go, oh, well, we made it, we thought about it. It didn't work that way. Somebody showed us how to do this. Somebody showed us how to use computers and certain tools and stuff like that. And that's why we're able to make stuff. Because you look at this, it's the truth. For like 1,000 or more, there wasn't too much stuff being made. You know, it was all horses, and all of a sudden, everything blew up in the end of 1800s and 1900s and 2000s. Everything's been made like quick, and it's just too fast for what wasn't happening for like 2,000 years. So that's one thing I've always wondered, why we have our technology so faster than most places in time. And all of a sudden, from like 150 years, it just blew up, and everything was getting made one after another. And then before that, there was nothing really being done. Like now, TV, CDs, DVDs, computers, 8-track, all that stuff before that, even disc, computer chips and stuff like that, on internet, all that. I think that was them. I think that we found their technology, not 100% of it, but we know some of it, or they talk to us, or that could be another possibility, that they're still here, and we just think that they're not. In a way, and what that means is they really run everything, and we just don't know they do. But some people know it, but we can't prove it. They're very much into this government. They have if they do exist, they have a lot of connections. That's why you got to really watch what you say. You never know who's an alien or not. I've been accused of being an alien from the planet Shimsham. That's a funny issue. We were going to do a skit about that. We never did. I think James got sick or something happened for a couple weeks, and so we didn't end up doing it. But some lady said I was a demon reptilian that came from the planet some planet or something. So I just made up the planet Shimsham, and we were going to do the skit, and that's why it was kind of funny, because she said I was an alien and I was from another planet, and I worked for the reptilian aliens, and my daughter's name is Bells, and he said it was King Biel. I was like, whatever, lady. But it's funny because it has to do with what we're talking about, but to a point, aliens. I believe aliens very much have so much to do with the pyramids. It's ridiculous. I don't think there's too much non-evidence on that. There's always stuff happening there. I don't know if they showed another video of like all of a sudden the stuff shoots off from the pyramids and just disappears, and there's something in that area that there was something there. There's a reason why there's that. Those still sit, just like in if you look at it like Easter Island. Why did they make those big statues? Even over there in England, Stonehenge. It just, but the way it looks around and circled and everything's said, there's got to be a reason. Even in the Amazon and some of the pyramids they found there in Asia and Africa and stuff like that, there's got to be something about it. Especially if you go around, the Himalayas. There's a lot of magic over there. There's a lot of something different over there. It's just, the abominable snowman sightings are seen there. They said there's all kinds of ghosts and stuff they see. Just it's a very dragons, all kinds of stuff. They believe in a lot of stuff over there. So it's a very magical place, that I think. And some parts of this world is just, they're different than others. Like Skinwalker Ranch, there's just all this stuff that happens there all the time. Bermuda Triangle, all this stuff happens. It's a beacon. I think there's a lot of energy right there, and sometimes it's uncontrollable, and it takes people. And what that means is it doesn't just take you, it takes you to another time. I believe that time travel happens at that area some reason, because they said it's happened before. They've been in the Bermuda Triangle, and remember the soldiers, they showed up at this time, and then they said they saw them, and then they hurried up and left, and they disappeared. It was like 5 minutes, and they never seen them again. So I mean, stuff like that's happened over there in the Bermuda Triangle. So it's just the same thing. I think there's something going on in certain parts of this world, and that the Egyptian one is now finding all this new stuff out. There's no way they were able to do it with, like he said, it would take too damn long, too many lives. You can only push slaves so much at that time. It would have been too much work, and it's too damn good. When it's too damn good at people in 2025 can't copy it, that should tell you something. We have nothing that perfect. So they had to have something perfect, or something gave them the power to use it. Like Stargate, I really do believe a lot of that. Maybe not with the gates, but I believe that's kind of what happened. The aliens were here, kind of started our whole being anyway. That's just my opinion. That's just what I think anyway. But it makes sense. I think aliens have something to do with the pyramids very much. I think they're beacons. I don't think we did any kind of digging. It would have took too damn long. See, James goes on for 35 minutes, and I don't know what to say after 10. So, and I get like tired of like, what the fuck? If it's like something really good, I got it. But like right now, there's nothing else I could say. I mean, pretty much said everything. That's why I went to other subjects that has to do with it, because he's pretty damn good at it, and it's so hard to cover some of the stuff. But no, I gotta agree with him on this one. Like, I hardly ever do, but I 100% think that we had nothing to do with building the pyramids. I think that if anything, we helped, but we didn't cut it. They might have placed some of the stuff. We might have done some of the work, because they're saying they rolled it. I don't believe that. It's the way they cut it was they had to have a tool. And just like they talk about the Ark of the Covenant, it was some kind of weird weapon, like a laser. And if you ever, and that's what I'm saying, was it that they used to cut? Maybe it was some kind of weapon they had, alien technology or something. I don't know. Maybe that's what they have. Maybe they had it. And that's why we were cutting perfect lines that you can't even do now. I think that's probably impossible. And I have to go with James. I think that we ain't that smart. Sorry. We ain't that smart. Not then. Shit, we couldn't even figure out to not throw people over in the Nile because they weren't born right. That's what they did, so people know, and they did it in Rome and stuff like that. So that's why I'm sitting there saying, I'm like, this is the kind of people that was running the world back then. I'm not saying they were stupid, because a lot of stuff has happened and knowledge came from them. But some of the stuff they did were not too smart and too bright. And just some people just had very much narcissistic egos, like Cleopatra and, whoever else was, all these kings. And they didn't care who died. So that's what I was going to say. They didn't care about regular people like me and you. We were just peons, and they sent you to work. And if you died, you died. But it would be too many people dying doing the jobs that James is talking about. And it's true. It's not going to happen. Too many people would go down all the way down in the earth. It's not going to happen. Not with the technology they had. So they had to have something other than what we've ever seen or ever comprehend. Because if you've seen that video I sent him, this thing's like changing. Did you see how it changed, James? It was like a weird metal, and it would disappear and then go into shape. It was like a shapeshifter. I've never seen anything like that. And I looked at the video and I watched it. It looks real, man. I mean, it was a weird video. That was something I've never seen in my life. And I'm wondering, just like, did you ever see, like they were talking about in space, that weird, what is it, the black unicorn or something like that? Remember, it was like a weird looking space shuttle, and it just moved and kept going back and forth, and it looked really weird, just kind of like that. I think maybe this technology they have, man, they don't have any way, they can control matter. Maybe they're smarter than what we think. It's a theory. I was thinking about something else that we could talk about. Did they figure out, maybe we're all wrong about traveling with space and stuff like that, or dimension. Maybe they just use matter. And what that means is they figure it out how to use matter and and wield it and change it. If you look how the ship was doing it, it looked like a matter, like some kind of metal, but it was like a matter. Maybe they figured out how to use matter, and that's why they get here so fast and so quick. Just saying. Always throw something out there, but other than that, I'll throw it over to James.
a couple points that I'd like everybody to kind of take away from the show. Things to think about. First of all, if they built it at ground level, that means they went over a mile in the air to build the pyramids on top of these pillars. Now, we've talked before about how these things weigh 10, 15, 20 tons, some of these blocks. How the hell did they get that kind of weight that high up? That's pretty crazy. Another point. Old boy mentioned the fact that there were pyramids all over the planet. That's true. What I would like to see done, and what I think would be very, very interesting, is to do this same SAR radar at all of these pyramid sites and see if all of these pyramids that we know about also have pillars underneath them going down to an underground city. Now, the reason I ask that is because my theory here is if all the other pyramids are the same way, then that would tell you maybe this is how that ancient civilization powered their cities. Because every time there was a big city, you would have pillars, pyramids to power it. And if we look underneath of the pyramids that are in South America, that are in China, they're all over the place. If we look underneath of those pyramids with the radar, will we find pillars? Will we find other structures like a mile deep? That would be very interesting to see, because if we do, then I think that greatly increases our understanding of what these things were. And at the very least, we know that they were uniform all over the world, and that it was probably some sort of power generation or something like that. Because think about it, today, if you saw power lines, you know they have power, right? Because no matter how they're making their power, whether it's hydro or wind or solar or coal burning power plants or nuclear power plants or whatever, no matter how they're doing it, they always get it to you through power lines. So that would be an interesting thing to think about. You know, if you have this everywhere around the world, that means that that's how they did it. And then think what could be so important that every city would have it. Well, power would be a very important thing. You know, that would be my idea of it. Also, you got to think, we talked earlier about how archaeologists think at that time everybody was hunter-gatherers and small nomadic tribes. And there weren't civilizations way, way back, right? But if you think about it, that's only a snapshot of what life was like then. If we look at life right now on our planet, there are great, great cities. There are great civilizations with incredible technology. And at the same time, existing on the same planet, in places like the Amazon jungle, and in places like Africa, and in places like Australia with Aborigines, you literally have small nomadic tribes that are still doing things exactly the same way their ancestors did thousands of years ago. They're still running around either naked or in little bitty loincloth-like deals. They're still hunting animals with spears and atlatls and bows and stuff like that. They're still doing things the way they did them back then. Right now. Now, let's say something comes along and wipes out all of civilization. There's a small amount of survivors, right? And let's say 10, 15, 20,000 years from now, an archaeologist starts digging, trying to find evidence of what life was like during our time period. And let's say they decide they're going to dig where the Amazon is now. And they come across this site where this small nomadic tribe lived. And they even dig up some of their weapons, their spears and their slings and stuff like that. What are they going to think? if there's nothing else, they're going to think, wow, man, 2025, they were all like little nomadic tribes of hunter gatherers that were just like using stone tools and shit. They didn't have any technology back then. So it gives you a very skewed view of the world depending on where you dig and what you find. So to say, well, that can't be real because we know that at this point in history, all mankind was nomadic hunter-gatherers, so there couldn't have been civilizations before that, is bullshit. Understand that at the time where most people in the world were living that way, you had civilizations back then, such as China. China's civilization goes back a long time ago. They invented a lot of stuff. They had a lot of technology that the rest of mankind didn't have for a long time. While you had like in Europe and in like Ireland and Scotland and places like that, you had these barbarians, who were just going around fighting and killing each other and murdering and pillaging and all this stuff. At that same point in time, you had a civilization in China that was doing advanced mathematics and inventing gunpowder and all of this amazing stuff, right? So just like today, in the past, you had points where you had good technology and good civilizations, and then you had hunter-gatherers and nomadic tribes. I mean, we've got evidence on the island of Florence that there were tiny little people, about the size of what we would think of it as a hobbit. They're named Homo florensis because that's the island they were found on. And the evidence that we found dates them to 10,000 years ago or less, which means after the end of the Ice Age, there were tiny little hobbit people living on this island. You got the pygmies, another group of tiny little hobbit-like people, completely different from the rest of civilization, living a nomadic hunter-gatherer type lifestyle in a time where they were completely isolated and completely different than the rest of humanity. So the reason I bring that point up is simply to say, just because an archaeologist found, like the Clovis people or something like that, they say, oh, well, these people were all hunter-gatherers. They weren't capable of doing this stuff. That doesn't mean anything. Yes, you might have found some people that were, but that doesn't mean that there were advanced civilizations at that time or even before. I think this discovery under the pyramids, if it pans out and turns out to be what we think it is amazing, because I don't see how it's a bad thing. It proves that there were advanced civilizations here before us. That gives us a better understanding of human history and our story, which I think, if you're not closed-minded, is good. It helps us learn. If we can examine some of this old technology and figure out what the hell it was and how the hell it worked, that can make our civilization better. They might have known things that we don't know, that we can discover. We know from the placement of the pyramids, we know from the placement of a lot of these monoliths and megaliths around the world, that these people had an amazing understanding of astronomy, of the placement of the constellations, of their cycles as they moved around in like 18-year loops and longer. They had knowledge of advanced mathematics in order to calculate where that thing was going to be at a certain time of the year, years away from now. That shit's spectacular. These were not stupid people. These were not like just hunter-gatherers that didn't have any idea about any of the things that we think that we know today that they didn't. They obviously had more knowledge than we do. A lot of us do, at least. If you told me, James, I want you to build me a structure and I want the sun to shine straight through a window and land on this pillar I'm going to put in the middle of it. But I want you to make it so that that only happens one day a year, right? During the summer solstice. It only happens one day a year. And when it happens, I want it to be the same every year. But then on the 18th year of that cycle, I want it to also light up this other thing, right? Something like that. If you told me to do that today, I couldn't do that. And I'm freaking smart, man. I'm brilliant. I couldn't do that. That's way beyond my capability. First of all, I don't know the cycles of all of these different stars and constellations and all that. I don't know how to have this line up with this and also line up with that. That's math that I'm not doing in my head. I don't have any idea how to do all that. That's well past what I'm capable of. Now, there's a lot of things I can do that are just as amazing to normal people. But those people weren't stupid. I hate it when I hear that from people. Oh, primitive man. They think everybody walking around like it's a freaking Flintstones or something, like they're all cavemen. It's crazy. They were capable of doing things that we can't do today. That's fact. And I guarantee you, they had technology that we would not even understand today. I think they were well more advanced than we are today. I think it's very possible they went to space. I think it's very possible they traveled to other planets. They might have reached a point in civilization where they could literally travel at will. But then shit happens. You know, asteroids hit, you're kind of screwed. Wipes everything out. Because remember, the asteroids hit, you had volcanoes that went off at the same time. You had massive earthquakes because of it. You had all of the glaciers melting because of the intense heat of it, causing worldwide flooding. So you had disaster after disaster after disaster. Kind of wiped most of people out. So then, just like today, if something happened like that today and wiped most of civilization out, and there's a handful of people left, what are the odds that those people are going to be able to rebuild civilization? Not very good. Just look at the people you know personally in your life. How many of those people can build a power plant? How many of those people know how to build a cell phone or to put a TV show on the air? How many of those people can get a radio station going? All the things that show civilization. How many of those people that you know can build an airplane and make it fly? You know, probably none. So the chances are that the people that survive aren't going to be the eggheads, aren't going to be the people that are super smart and can do those things. It's going to be the tough people. It's going to be the broke people, the people that are poor, because those people already know how to survive tough times. People that are super smart don't have a whole lot of tough times usually, because their brains make them successful. And they don't have to worry about feeding themselves all the time and all that stuff like normal people do. So the people that'll probably survive, honestly, are the rednecks, a bunch of mountain people. And one thing about us mountain people, we can survive anything. We know how to fish, we know how to hunt, we know how to farm, we can live off the land. We have a very good chance of surviving if we don't die in the initial disaster. So most likely the people that survive are not going to be the people that can rebuild society technologically. Now they can rebuild society in a more primitive way. They can make a society based on hunting and fishing and farming, which is what we see after the Ice Age happened. Is you had people that started to rebuild everything and get civilization going again, and it was essentially based on fishing and hunting and farming. It was all about getting food, getting calories, survival, until things changed, until things got better. We started building back up. We started having more and more children. We started having people that were smart come up. and they had enough to eat, so they were able to think. Instead of worrying every second a day about how to eat, they could actually start thinking about things. Slowly, you started building up knowledge and building up technology again. And the way technology works, it's exponential. It compounds. It's one discovery changes everything. And then once you get that discovery, there's 100 discoveries that come off of that one discovery. And it moves quicker and quicker and greater leaps as time goes on because you have more and more foundation to build on. That's just the way it works with science and technology. So it's not a surprise that we built up very, very quickly from the time of horses to going into space. It's not that doesn't surprise me because that's kind of the way it works. Because one guy will discover, hey, I figured out this electricity thing. I figured out how to harness it and make it work. Oh, cool. Well, we can use that to power this, and this. Now all of a sudden we have lighting in our homes. Oh, that's awesome. Well, we took the idea that the Romans had of plumbing, and now that we have electricity, we can hook all of that up so that we can actually run a actual sewage plant that can make the water usable again. So we can have wastewater plants, we can have water treatment plants, we can have all this stuff because now we have energy that we can power those things. That's awesome. We can take what we used to do. We used to take a family to do a small little plot of land, just enough food to feed themselves and a little bit of their neighbors. Well, now we have energy. Now we done figured out how to burn gasoline and all this other shit. So now we can make diesel. So now we can have tractors. We can have equipment that can do that same work that it used to take all day in an hour. Now we can do massive fields instead of just small fields, which means we can feed a hell of a lot more people. That makes civilization possible. That means little villages turn into towns that turn into cities because you have food for all those people. Population grows. You get more and more diverse thought. You get more and more people bouncing ideas off each other. It's a beautiful thing. So I wanted to just leave you guys with that. Some things to think about. I think this is not a bad thing at all. I think it's a great discovery, and I think it's going to lead to a whole new understanding if people don't get all butthurt. Because here's the problem. Archaeologists are going to say, well, we've already written books about this. We've already based our entire career on studying this. So that can't be right, because otherwise, if that's right, that means all of our life's work is bullshit. So they're going to try to bury it. That's what always happens. That's why you guys don't know that there's already advanced civilizations that we have found from before the time of the Ice Age. Archaeologists say it's bullshit. If you don't believe me, look up a guy named Graham Hancock. Graham Hancock, he's got some interesting books out there, some interesting specials out there. You got a show on Netflix out there where he talks about ancient civilizations and the evidence and stuff that there is for them. Very, very interesting stuff. I could get into a lot of it, but we've been on a long time. So, that's another couple hours at least of show, and I don't think we can do that because the radio station won't play it, I don't think. So anyway, love you guys. Appreciate you guys. I'm going to throw over to Old Boy and let him give his final sum-ups and shout-outs and all that jazz, and then we will wrap up. Go ahead, brother.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, we'll make this quick. Yeah, just like I said, on this kind of show, he knows a lot about. I'll probably throw about 10, 15 minutes of it, but he's going to – and then he got into another 25 minutes of something, so that's why it's hard to do. So, but it doesn't matter. So you guys know we're going to be doing stuff a little differently, so show will be a little longer probably sometimes. So I hope you guys enjoy it here on Parax Radio every Sunday nights at 12 a.m. Eastern and 9 Pacific time, and the Best of show Tuesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific. You guys can follow us on James Hershey's YouTube page. You can get stuff at like shirts, memorabilia, stuff like that from the shows, and We're Screwed and stuff like that at teespringstaringintotheabyss.com. Follow us on Spotify. I just said James Hershey's YouTube page. You subscribe. That being said, let us know in the comments what you think about the shows. Always. We love to hear new ideas, because we're trying to get to 10 years. It's very hard to do a show for 10 years. The 10-year anniversary is going to be great. We'll be around for that. Love to see 20, but we'll see what happens. But you guys have a good night. Misfits, your ladies, monster lovers, demoners. I fucking love you, and have a good night.
Shit, brother, I could probably talk for 10 years. You know what I mean? Just one show. And believe it or not, it may not seem like it, but I try very hard to keep it brief and not go super, super in depth on stuff, because I know I have a tendency to bloviate. And I could literally, and we've done this before when we first started doing this, we would do like 3-hour shows. Like I could literally sit here and talk to you for 3 or 4 hours about one of these subjects and really, really get deep, deep, deep into it. It's possible. So I try to keep it surface level and not get too deep, and try to fit everything in that I can fit in a timely manner without over explaining things. But it's difficult because like there's probably another 2 hours worth of stuff that I could talk about tonight for this that I didn't even bring up, that I didn't even get into, just because I knew they were massive rabbit holes that once we go down, we're going to be down there for a good half hour, 45 minutes for each one. You know what I mean? Just to be able to do a surface level of it and not get real, real deep. So anyway, let me know what you guys think. As always, up to you to make up your own mind. We appreciate you. We love you, and we'll catch you on the next one. Till we speak to you again. Love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock for Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
Hey, this is Lee.
And this is Michelle.
And this is Dustin from the Dead Zone.
Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.